asked them, "So, what are you waiting for?"
So, what are you waiting for?
So, that's the gospel for today. First, everybody is in. All the bridesmaids, all 10 of them. All of them with their lamps or oil lamps, all their preparations are made. Everything is set. And now comes the hard part, the waiting. And the waiting. And the waiting some more. It gets to be tiresome, right? There's a yawn and they all fall asleep. But then all of a sudden the bridegroom arrives. It's been a long time. Chop, chop, everybody, let's go. Let's get this thing moving. Here we go. And then all of a sudden some are in, but some are out. If you brought enough extra oil with you after all that waiting, you're in. If you didn't bring any extra, you're out. Out looking, out shopping, out of luck. The gospel of the Lord. Praise be to Christ. Right? You all said? Huh? Really? Okay, I was at a wedding last week. Saw some of you there. We were at Trinity Lutheran Church in Pembroke Pines. There's one in green wearing her mother of the bride pin still yet today, very happily and proudly. And I saw some pictures of the married couple on horseback out on the ocean. Boy, that looks nice. They're having a good time, thanks be to God. We were at Trinity Lutheran Church, not only because it's a big space, but because the family has some history there. It was like a coming home, a coming together. It was a wonderful event. And so there I was in the back office. Everything was ready, and there I was, waiting, waiting, waiting. Okay, it wasn't that long, because the bride and the groom were amazingly on time, thank God. But still, I was back there long enough to have a moment to just look around. Now, Pastor Keith Spencer wasn't around anywhere, but there in the office, there they were, the prepared masters for the bulletins for the church. Not just the bulletin for the next day, because we were there on Saturday. Not just the bulletin for next week. But all the bulletin masters back, don't even listen. Put your fingers in your ears and don't even listen to this. All of the master bulletins were there through the 3rd week of Advent. Well, I asked Danny, the office manager, and she said, yes, Pastor Keith, he likes to work well in advance. Well in advance? Well, let me tell you something. Relative to the bridesmaids in today's gospel story, Pastor Keith is getting a first-class ticket on his ride to heaven. Whereas me, I will be chasing the caboose and trying to make it there, okay? Getting them ready all the way through the 3rd week in Advent. Mac, let me just say, it ain't gonna happen. But now I want to ask you again, how is this the gospel? Does Pastor Keith's preparations make him more eligible to get into heaven than my preparations make me? How is this good news? How does our sense of God's grace showered upon us when we lack end up with us 2 Sundays after Reformation Sunday with a gospel text that says, even if you do everything right, but don't make enough preparations for that extended period of time of waiting, well, then you won't make it at all. Is that the gospel? I mean, I've got a neighbor who has his house stocked with MREs. Anybody? Anybody? Meals ready to eat, huh? He is convinced that the stock market is going to crash again. And it's about that time. So he is going to be ready. I don't have any MREs, and I don't know how many of you have either. So should you and I be worried? I have some other neighbors who have been learning and practicing and are now teaching some others, including Nancy and me, how to grow healthy foods in our own backyards. Used to be something people did all the time, but now, you know, we have kids who don't even know that hamburger comes from a cow that has to be fed by grain. Anyway, all of that. Vegetables that we're growing in our backyard. Now that's more my kind of plan, honestly. And last week when we had new folks joining the congregation here, we gave them all 1 or 2 packages of seeds. So soon we'll want to know from you what's growing in your garden. Maybe more importantly, what's growing in your lives. Commentators on this text seem to be in agreement that this gospel text is just a hard one to preach. It's ominous, it's archaic, it's confusing, it's uncomfortable, and it's generally difficult to understand. So if you read this text with me and you're having a hard time, guess what? You're not alone. It's not you, it's the text. Realistically, waiting is a hard thing to do. It's hard for kids, and it's hard for adults too. I learned something in preparation for today. Did you know that in the way old, like centuries old seasons, the season of Advent wasn't 4 weeks, but 7? Did you know that? That would make today the first Sunday in Advent. But that's been changed a long, long time ago. But you know what the season of Advent means, right, for kids? It means time for preparation for Christmas and all that it entails. Adam, you're not the only one who's still waiting to grow up, okay? We're still waiting, and it's hard for adults too, waiting for something that should already have come, something that is overdue, that you're not even sure for sure that it will ever come. Waiting, that means we need to be prepared for something, and we're not even certain what that something is going to be, what it's going to look like. That kind of waiting is hard. And in general, waiting makes us feel anxious. Because guess what? We're not in control. But we all have to wait on something, on someone, at some point in time. In case you didn't get the memo, life is not bound to follow our personal preset timetable for how things should work out. So maybe the question that we can address today is, what is it that we are waiting for? What are you waiting for? It can be something that we're looking forward to. It can also be something that is difficult. Last week, as I was waiting to meet someone, I got a call that I was waiting for, or maybe it was the call that I wasn't waiting for. It was the call from my mechanic who told me the news. You know how that goes, right? Good news and bad news. Good news, your car is still drivable. That already didn't sound too good, right? At 215,500 miles on my VW Golf, he said, it's still drivable. But the bad news, he said he can't find a rebuilt transmission that he could put into this car And he thinks that if we open it up to figure out what the noise is that's coming from that general area, we might need to replace it. And so he's worried about doing that at all, but he says buying a new one is out of the question because a new one will literally cost more than the car is worth. And so now I'm waiting again. Do I keep on driving and hope that everything keeps going well? There's a plan. How does that work out? Or do I find a new one? New meaning new to me. To replace it. How much will that cost? But you know what? The waiting that I'm doing is nothing. Compared to what other people are going through, what I'm going through is truly small stuff. Because the truth is, someone somewhere is waiting to hear from a doctor. Waiting to hear about test results. Someone is waiting to hear about loved ones in Syria or Iraq or some other war-torn nation. There have been people who are waiting through a 21-day incubation period to find out whether the help that they provided to some people who are desperately ill has infected them as well with Ebola. Waiting to find out. 21 days can seem like forever. Waiting, some are waiting to find out if a college has made a decision about them going to that college. Waiting on a job opportunity that will put them back to work. The commonality is that we are all of us waiting on something. We're all living in an in-between time. Even Jesus, when he told this story, was living in that in-between time of having come in and upset the temple and waiting to see what they were going to do to him. Waiting can be the hardest thing. Maybe the gift that we have, that we can somehow take hold of as God's children, is recognizing that waiting can also be an opportunity to experience God's presence. Like I shared with the children this morning, that you light the candle and you let it burn. If you don't have any more wax, if you don't have any more oil, the only thing you can do is rely on God to see what will happen beyond that. We have the opportunity as we're waiting to experience God's presence and even to share that presence with others who are waiting also. Each time we work for justice in this world to right the things that are wrong, like Amos invites us in the first lesson that we read this morning. Amos invites the waters to flow over us. He invites us to let those waters flow over us, to flood our hearts, our souls, our spirit with God's love for that which is right. And when we do, we invite God's love. We invite the presence of Jesus into our lives anew. Each time we bear each other's burdens, we testify to Jesus' presence. When we make sure that those who are going through a hard time are aware that they're not going through that hard time alone. When we let them know that we're thinking about them, that we're praying for them, we bring God's presence to them. Each time we advocate for the poor, or reach out to the friendless, or in some way work to make this world that God loves a better place, we testify to the presence of the risen Christ. Even if, or maybe particularly when, the mayor threatens to arrest a 90-year-old World War II veteran who serves regularly for the last 20 years meals to the homeless poor on the beach in Fort Lauderdale, and gets arrested now, not once but twice. In fact, the last time he got arrested last Sunday, it was along with two pastors, and as I looked over, one of them was a pastor that I know, Dwayne Black, at the sanctuary. How do I know him? Because when I was a hospice chaplain, I had a man who said he was a member of that church. He was practically homeless himself. And when I said to him, "What are your funeral arrangements?" he said, "Pastor Black has everything taken care of." See, that's what his heart is. And so when people are getting themselves arrested, doing that which Jesus has commanded us to do, to take care of those who are the poor and homeless in our midst, somehow that kind of action has to encourage people in their homelessness. Maybe the mayor needs to roll up his sleeves and serve a meal sometime. But then again, maybe you and I do too. I want to add, I did some research on the Love Thy Neighbor Foundation. You can check them out, lovethyneighbor.org. That is Mr. Abbott's foundation. He founded it quite some few years ago when his wife died. And he wanted to carry on the work that they had done together in a new way. And in case you're not aware, Mr. Abbott is doing a whole lot more than just feeding the homeless. He's actually training folks who come to the service that he provides. He is providing them training so that they can become executive chefs, which, by the way, there's a great need for in Broward County. And he's not only bringing them through his own training, but if they graduate from that, he even sends them on to the McFatter Institute. And all the costs are paid. Because he said what it's really about is not giving people a meal, but teaching them a skill that will take them through a lifetime. But in the meantime, he says he's going to keep on serving meals wherever he needs to. They are providing nutritionally balanced diet and training and opportunities for job placement to people. And there was one woman who now works as a chef, a mature woman, who admitted that in the past in her life there was drug abuse and all kinds of other issues. But she said of Mr. Abbott, 90-year-old World War II veteran, she says, "He saved my life." There are many interpretations of the gospel text today, many options. Most of us leave with more questions than answers, and that's okay. Today, I like one solution to this gospel text that suggests that the foolish bridesmaids' real problem was not that they ran out of oil, but rather that they let others tell them that they didn't have enough. And based on what other people told them, others who had some to give but refused to share. And so what their real problem was is they left their main calling. Their main calling was to be there for the bridegroom when he came. And what were they doing? Shopping at the first 24-hour Walmart to say, "Do you have any oil that we could get?" And having to go to 2 or 3 Walmarts before they could find what they needed. And when they got back, having left the vigil of the wedding, they got back. And it was too late. They were locked out not because they didn't have any oil. They were locked out because the groom didn't even recognize them because they weren't where they needed to be when they should have been there. What they should have done was stay put, finish their waiting, be in right relationship with the bridegroom. They should have greeted him. They should have welcomed him. Instead, they missed him completely. So, my friends, today, I share with you, what are you waiting for? Maybe it's God's move in our lives. But here's my suggestion to you. When you think you don't have enough, don't stop and tell God what you don't have and what, because of what you don't have, what you can't do. But rather do what you can with what you do have. And God will make sure that the rest will surely follow. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit.